everybody. So we're back in Brewster. This is one of our stops that we do very frequently. I already pre-tripped. I've already lined up and inspected all my vehicles. All I haven't done is set up the truck. I've had breakfast. I'm ready to go for this gorgeous day. So today we're going to talk about why we position the vehicles the way we position them. All right. Depends on who you ask. In my opinion, it's first positions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It goes in chronological order. Some people might say the third position is actually the first position on the top of the trailer. It just depends on who you ask. I know some truck or some trailer manufacturers like I think it's Lure. They load the top first and then they load the bottom section second. So for mine, it's a Cottrell. It goes tractor, top, then the bottom of the tractor behind the cab, then the top of the trailer, and then the bottom. You can essentially skip those two positions, position 3 and position 7, and have vehicles there and still load around it. You just got to be very careful, depending on what you got in those positions. But for the most part, those are the only two positions that you can get away with a workaround. In versatile position, you can put that on forwards or backwards, just depending on what you got going on. All right, so we're gonna load the first car up, position 1. Like I said, for the most part, will always be backwards. Some manufacturers, they will tell you when you're picking up at the port or whatever that it needs to go on forward, a spoiler or something. And for the last few loadouts, I've had small cars or SUVs up here, so I haven't been changing the pockets, except my big load going down to North Carolina. I did have to change the pockets for that to accommodate the F-150 that was up here. All right, so next car will be position 2. I got a decent sized SUV going under. Okay. Decent sized SUV going under. So what I usually do is I look at my load and what I got, and depending on what I got is where I place my front tires. Because I'm not using those pockets, if you put it all the way up, the vehicle is gonna sit a little bit higher once you position it. So tend to leave it back a little bit in order to make height. So I predominantly work in the Northeast, out of New York. We're allowed 13.6 as our highest height. All right, guys, let's load for position number 3. Fun fact, my first load by myself, I almost quit because I couldn't get out the vehicle. It was on a day cab and the vehicle needed to be in the pockets and I couldn't get the door open. Thank God I didn't. All right, so position 3. Pretty straightforward. Take the vehicle, put it on backwards. So we got position 3 in. So you can see why we kind of load while we load. In essence, we're playing a big game of Tetris. If the car on top is forwards and we're gonna be angling the back end, the highest point of the car would be just by the tip of the windshield where the windshield meets the roof. Therefore, the car underneath needs to be the opposite direction, being that when we angle it down, the highest part being where the tip of the windshield and the roof meets, can go closer to the deck while the bottom of the top car comes closer to the hood. Let's go get position number 4. Depending on how big the cars are, it's how far you slingshot that deck and place it for the vehicle that you're going to be putting on. Since it's 2 cars, I can pretty much leave the deck out a little bit and load the car to the edge of the deck and still have room to turn. If you have, like, let's say a F-150 with an extended bed and an SUV like a Cadillac Escalade, that deck needs to be all the way in as far as it can go. And not only that, you got to make sure that you have enough room in the middle to turn. Otherwise, if you don't, when you do turn, those 2 vehicles will collide. All right. All right, guys, position 5. I tend to always put backwards. Sometimes if it's cars, if I'm doing all cars, I can get away with putting on 4 and 5 on forwards as well as number 6, and you'll be perfect height. But when you have a mixture of types of vehicles like a car or an SUV, you can put an SUV over an SUV or even a minivan over a minivan. Be very careful though. You have to use those pockets and you got to be a little bit like creative with it, because sometimes even though you're using the pockets, the height isn't gonna be okay. So for the most part, if I'm not worried about height and or space, I put the rear wheels right in the middle of those pockets. But if I were, depending on the vehicle, I will back it up closer to position number 4 or use those pockets. But since it's a car over a small SUV, I'm not too pressed to do anything too crazy. Now, position 6 has what we call flippers. This is the flipper. In this configuration, this flipper is for big vehicles, SUVs, pickup trucks, and stuff like that. If I flip that flap and it looks like that, that's for cars or small vehicles. But we're gonna flip it in so that the flipper hangs down. Now, the taller the vehicle, the longer the vehicle, it matters where the rear wheel sits on this flipper. If you don't care about height, you can put it anywhere. If you have the space, obviously, in front. If you don't, and you care about height, and you don't really got much space to work with, you can leave like the edge of the tire, like right here, and strap around it, and it'll still work. But I'm putting up a Jeep Compass up there first. So it is not required of me to be very creative with how I place this vehicle on there. What I like to do is just make sure that it sits its furthest as I can. Just to allow the weight to be distributed. It's not a requirement, but see how much space I have between position 5 and 6. I could essentially, I can't really put an F-150 up here because of the way this car is set. But if I move this car back to where I have just about an inch of space between the bumper and the front of that car, then this leaves me more room for a larger vehicle to come closer to the front of the deck, and where the rear wheel will at least make it onto the deck. That's what we got to deal with. It's a game of inches, Tetris, weight, and space. Position 7, pretty straightforward. It's gonna go on forwards. I'm gonna go where the tire touches the flipper, which you can flip open for bigger vehicles such as large SUVs and or pickup trucks, to allow them to go into a little pocket and gain a few inches so that you have clearance on top. That's the flipper I'm talking about right there. When the tire touches, that's when I stop. Not every vehicle is like that. Some vehicles have longer doors. You also got to make sure that you can open that front door so it doesn't hit that pillar right there. Also, when we're loading this position, the furthest point that I can get the front of this bumper is about this black line right here. Any further, if I turn, this tractor will hit that car. Done it before. All right, so lesson learned, never again. All right, for position 8, we're gonna go get the vehicle. Like I said, it goes on backwards because we're gonna angle it down where the front wheels sit up higher than the rear wheels. This position, this vehicle is the most pronounced when it comes to angling on the truck. I mean, you can get that position 6 to angle down with larger vehicles. Like let's say you have an 8-car load and you got a big transit van or something on the back, you can really angle that last position down. Let's try practice my loading SUVs with my mirrors. I don't really do SUVs with mirrors, but let's try it. Too far over. Angle it down, I can't see. I can't get this puppy squared up. Too far back, I can tell because that door is going to hit that pillar. I can also tell you I am too far on the driver's side than I am on the passenger side. If I go under, I'm going to tell you right now, the front wheel is going to be halfway on the truck in the middle. Oh, wow. I doubted myself and I was incorrect. The soles are pretty wider than I thought they would be. I legitimately thought that passenger side was going to be like almost in the middle of that truck. But there you have it. Last position will be number 9. For 90% of the times, I will always put this car on backwards. My other truck, I used to always put it on forwards because the way it was a 75-foot trailer. A 75-foot truck trailer configuration. So it forwards was the best position for it. So when I park it, I like the front wheels to be right between the flipper and those two flippers right there. I like the wheels to be right between those two flippers right there. And all we got to do now is just lower the bottom, set the top, pin the decks, and measure and get the heck out of here. All right, there you have it. Vehicles are secured. Decks are set. For the most part, as you can see, there's a lot of open spaces on this truck. This is an 80-foot truck from nose to tail. It's 80 feet long. With that being said, there's going to be a lot of space on the truck and trailer between vehicles when there are small cars like this. Sometimes you can put a horse here through the space that you have between the vehicles because you got some big units. But for the most part, this is a very straightforward load, very easy. There is a lot of space between my car in the middle that allows for me to turn, and there's a lot of space between my bumper and my tractor here for this number 7 car, so I can turn a little bit more sharp. I still can't do it as sharp as I would like other trucks, like regular semi trucks, because of my stinger. My articulating point is behind a long wheelbase tractor, makes it so much longer and harder to turn. As you can see, there's damage to my mud flaps because I turned too sharp at a cul-de-sac. This went into this. If I had turned just a hair bit tighter, I could have popped my rear drive tire. We don't ever want that to happen. My boss would have my head. Anyway, I folded up the flippers because it burnt me once on a new car load. I had a Range Rover here in the belly and I was backing into the dealership, and this flipper went into the bumper because I was turning sharply. But like I said, one of your most straightforward loads you can get. We made height. Everything is under 13.2, and we're good to go to New Jersey.